Well, thank you, Brian, and can I acknowledge Jim Hallion, Peter Fulton, and our platinum sponsor and NEC State Manager, Chris Corty, as well as members of the South Australian Senior Management Council, members of the South Australian Executive Service, and AIIA South Australian Council members and staff representative, Andrew Mills, South Australian Government Chief Information Officer. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a wonderful introduction, I thought, seeing the words that were given to us about what people imagined as the challenges for South Australian ICT. And it did remind me of the first occasion when I had some significant contact with the ICT sector when I was in my role as Science and Information Technology most recently. And the one thing that did strike me was this overwhelming sense of the people in this sector wanting to be part of the solution and really being incredibly upbeat and positive about that. And you don't always get that everywhere in the South Australian community. And Brian's suggestion, it sounds good, but is something we do hear a lot of in the South Australian community. And I must say I hear less of that speaking to the ICT sector. So that's a wonderful thing. It's very motivating. And I must say I put that down to people like Michael Lucic, Byron, and of course Pete and all of the others that have made a regular set of representations to me. And I've, since that time, because I was so impressed with the enthusiasm and the progressive solution-based approach of the ICT sector, I have from time to time caught up and had a range of forums with them, even though it was outside of my portfolio responsibility. So I do want to thank you for your stance, the mood of mind that you bring to really your business, and I think to the challenges that we face in government. And I particularly want to acknowledge the Australian Information Industry Association in bringing us to this point. Brian's already acknowledged the people that have played a key role, but we wouldn't have been in this position of the public launch of this paper, South Australia Connected, Ready for the Future, without the assistance of AIIA. So thank you very much for the role that you've played. It's already been a productive partnership between government and the ICT sector, and the point of this is to make it flourish and grow further. By involving industry and co-designing South Australia Connected, we've been able to tap into the skills, expertise and perspectives that they offer right from the start. And I think that South Australia has a couple of things about it which I think make it particularly well suited to embrace the whole ICT offering and really be a leader. I don't think it's an unreasonable ambition to regard ourselves as the opportunity to be a leader in this regard. I think the two things that really work in that regard are our culture of innovation. We've had really a number of firsts that we've pioneered here in South Australia. And I think that's something we need to recapture, and that really sits at the heart of ICT. That's what essentially this sector is all about. The second thing that I think is a particularly South Australian trait is this notion of working together, this notion of partnerships. And we see it between government, business and community. It really runs through the South Australian story. And I don't think it's any accident. It's not just an accident of our size and our relative isolation in this continent. I think it has to do with the challenges that we've faced ever since settlement. We've had to be a bit smarter here. We don't have a number of the natural advantages of other places. It is part of our culture to regard ourselves as living in the driest state, in the driest inhabited continent. And I think that that idea of actually being just a little bit cleverer than the average and actually doing things with less has been part of the South Australian story. So partnerships, smart new things are really at the heart of the South Australian story, but we have to recover that if we're going to succeed in a world which is changing incredibly rapidly. So our ability to innovate, to work more closely with each other will be at the heart of our success. And I've just seen some fantastic examples just here today. Aerometrics, a South Australian-based geospatial company, working on a leading edge of mapping technology. Aerometrics' new product line, Aero 3D Pro, was on the display just outside, and I had an opportunity to look at it. And apart from feeling almost sick with the 3D technologies that are making me a bit woozy, it was a fantastic, I think, sight into how you can actually engage the community in a public consultation process about the spatial form of cities. I think this could be an extraordinary tool for public consultation as we seek to change the shape and feel of our city. Too often these debates are carried out in this very two-dimensional way where things can be misrepresented, people can be scared. This gives you an opportunity to visualise precisely what's going on. I think it's a fantastic tool. Another example is something you're seeing right now, I think, the Captioning Studio, founded in South Australia in 2004. The Captioning Studio has won awards for its technology, and not only does it deliver transcripts seconds after the words are spoken, the record of the event is available online and searchable by reference to the spoken word. So if I make a mistake, I'm sure somebody will be able to find it very quickly and use it against me. So it's a fantastic idea. Whose idea was this? But South Australia has always done best when it's actually working in these really deep partnerships. And that's the two themes that really sit at the heart of the economic statement that I released earlier this month. What I said in that statement, apart from setting out some areas of focus in our economy, I also said that there were three things we need to change about ourselves. One is we need to be more outward looking, but the two relevantly for this conference are that we need to recapture this culture of innovation that's been at the heart of our success, and that we also need to reassert this notion of partnerships, which also has been at the heart of our success. The economic statement that I released sets out where the economy is at and looks at where we may go in the future, and it's my plan for the economic future of South Australia. And it assesses our strengths, and their strengths are considerable. We have really, over the whole of the life of this state, beginning with the colony, it's been a remarkable transformation where we now have a diverse, resilient and strong local economy. We've had 21 years of continuous economic growth here, and there's not many places in the world that are able to say that. And we've also now broadened our base, obviously an agrarian economy, then a manufacturing industrialised base, but since that time, with the falling of the tariff walls, we've now broadened our economy out in a way which really sits across the full span of activities. And what we've decided to do in this statement is to give a clear-eyed assessment about what we need to do now if we're to flourish and how we need to go about it. And creative partnerships are plainly the key. Partnerships with many different structures and dynamics arising from an open-minded evaluation of what contributions will bring the best results. And ICT is a key enabler of this sort of innovation. It will allow us to do the new things, and we need to be open to using it in new ways. Indeed, the ICT sector itself is a significant economic actor. In South Australia, there are 22,000 ICT workers, comparable in employment terms with the hospitality sector or the finance sector. State government employs 8% of those workers, and our annual spend on ICT goods and services is more than $550 million. That's a significant outlay, and that's why it's important that we're always searching for efficiencies, such as those that we achieved since we began the Future ICT program about a decade ago. At that time, I was Minister for Administrative Services, and we embarked upon the Future ICT program, and it's been an extraordinary success for South Australia. Any enterprise needs to find efficiencies where it can. Those efficiencies deliver the capacity to commit resources to innovation. So this becomes a virtuous circle here. As we create the room because of innovation, we create further room for innovation. And that's really what we're here about today. The point of what we're doing now is that ICT is not marginal. It's not an add-on to a predetermined public policy. Being ICT savvy is part of developing good policy, better services, great efficiency, and more prosperity. As Andrew was telling me recently, we don't have ICT people sitting down in the basement that we bring up blinking into the sunlight anymore. We are all ICT professionals now. If we aren't, we should be. And we need to bring this recognition and recognition that industry has a role to play in being at the table earlier when we seek to deal with problems. That's why working together is a key theme of this paper. Lack of technology is no longer an excuse for not working together, and this is where the paper SA Connected seeks to take us. Our new strategy and the related changes we're announcing today have two aspects. It is true that they're another step in the years of constant striving for innovation and improvement, but today is also a jumping off point, a decisive moment in pushing for new directions in the quality and range of ICT-assisted connections. Government exists to serve people. That's what the word minister means, to serve. Building connections, improving them, extending them is essential to our effective discharge of that responsibility. We need to be conscious that in building these connections, we're conscious of the digitally disadvantaged or the language disadvantaged, and we can all do more to ensure that we don't leave people behind. We've been leaders in exploring the connectivity offered by ICT. And there have been some extraordinary achievements that we shouldn't take for granted here in South Australia. Our South Australian Government electronic messaging service, SageMs, is a platform and really reflects a classic South Australian style innovation story. SageMs was an idea that started small, was proven within one agency and then propagated right across the South Australian Government. It is the key enabler of efficient collaboration across government. Yet even now jurisdictions around the world are envious of this communications infrastructure, itself an example of government and industry partnership. In our direct connections with people seeking to access government information services, we also have our single entry point, sa.gov.au, since 2009. It has not stood still since then. For instance, two new services developed as recently as the last few months are email and SMS reminders for vehicle registration renewals and invoice tracking system for businesses. Its EasyReg online facility for vehicle registration now handles more than 64% of registration renewals. And more recently, EasyReg smartphone apps have been the medium for 140,000 renewal transactions and more than 1.6 million inquiries. Now, delivering these things in government isn't easy, but we need to make it easier. But the enthusiasms with which these initiatives have been taken up neatly illustrates why we cannot stand still. Increasingly, people expect to be able to deal with government online, and when we meet those expectations, we also develop efficiencies in service delivery. That's why I've announced today a significant refresh and overhaul of sa.gov.au. It will have different ways of finding services, a searchable library of publication, easier ways to contact government services, and a link to community organisations who partner government. It's also why we're making government data available to the community so that ICT experts and entrepreneurs can explore the potential for creating new services or unleashing the economic potential of this data. We're encouraging people to use this data as part of the Unleashed competition that will happen in South Australia as part of the GovHack, Australia's largest national open data competition. These are the type of new things that we need to do in new ways to not just deliver better services or drive efficiencies, but to secure a more prosperous future. In the paper we've released today, we're also exploring other things we need more exploration and discussion of. For example, the idea of a concept known as Sensei, S-E-N-S-A. It's about recognising that not all data of public interest is in government hands, and that ICT can play a role in collecting and using new sets of data in previously unimagined ways. Could we use current technology to bring together a sensor network for South Australia that could give us levels of detail about what happens, where and when it happens, so that we have much better information for planning to meet the needs of our people? For instance, GPS-equipped smartphones could, with their owner's permission and blessing, send all kinds of telemetry data about people's travel to and from in our community. And imagine what that could do to our city. If at the heart of a vibrant city, one of our key objectives is getting people into the city, understanding how people use the city, what time of the day they use them, what the demographic is that uses the city at different times of the day, would create enormous fields of data that could allow businesses that seek to provide opportunities for people to come to the city at different time, an enormous set of opportunities. So they're things that we can do with government data, but often data that's held outside of government in a way that promotes our shared priorities. A development like that would give better quality information to guide all sorts of decisions, not just businesses, but also our own decisions about urban planning, transport, neighbourhood needs, and even work conditions. But there are many implications to be considered. That's why I've asked the Chief Executive of the EPA, Campbell Gemmell, to convene a roundtable on the feasibility of this idea. We'll meet with senior stakeholders from academia, the community and industry, and I want this roundtable to answer two questions. Is Sensei a good idea? Second, and much harder question, if it's a good idea, should we do it? The Sensei discussion is an illustration of the scope of fresh thinking that's contributed to this document, and you'll see many of these ideas set in the SA Connected document. The challenge now, though, is to carry through that fresh thinking, to carry through and build the partnerships that have brought us to this day. So after a period of consultation on SA Connected, the themes we're exploring will be incorporated into the government's next ICT strategy, and I expect that agencies will address the themes to assist them in their ICT planning. From the point of view of the public sector, and I think you heard some of this earlier in some of the contributions at the beginning, this new ICT strategy is inescapably linked to our current program for public sector renewal. We know that we're asking our public sector to do even more with fewer and fewer resources. Community demands are really heading way ahead of what the community expects to give to government in terms of additional resources. So instead of just piling additional work on existing public servants, we have to think of service redesign. We simply cannot do more things with the same number of people. We have to think about entirely new ways of doing things. And so there couldn't be a more important connection between the public sector renewal program and the work that we're doing here with this particular ICT strategy. So thank you very much for giving of your time today to be part of this. I do sense that this is something which is more than just an industry proposition or a government proposition. I think people do actually believe in South Australia and are excited by the idea of us accepting this role of leadership in the ICT sector in this nation. So good luck on your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Premier. I now have the great privilege of introducing number one public servant in the state, at least that's how I think of him, the Chief Executive of Department of Premier and Cabinet, Mr. Jim Hallian. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian, and the pay rise will come later for that little... Look, thanks for the opportunity, everyone, to talk to you today, and it's a fabulous gathering here. I want to acknowledge the commitment of the Premier to ICT